record, and we are recording. And I'm going to let more people in. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a quick screen share. And I probably should have had that ready. Sorry. You move over here. All right, so tonight you are all here for the first of 3 must-have conversations: life, legacy, and longevity. And we have 3 amazing experts who are going to be talking about each one of these individually. The first one, which is tonight, is the incredible Jamie Sarche. If you don't know her, I'd be shocked, frankly. But you will learn about her tonight, and she is really just dynamite. She's very passionate, and we're going to have a lot of great conversation tonight. I am hosting tonight. I'm Catherine Wells, and I'm with Serenity Engage, and I'm thrilled to be hosting. Jamie and I have had several Facebook Live sessions together, so we always have a great time. And then next Thursday on the 19th, Pam Moss is, did I say that right, Pam? Sorry. Pam Moss is going to be talking about legacy, and she's an estate planning attorney. There are a lot of things that we don't think about with estate planning, and I can tell you from my experience with both my parents who passed last year, if they hadn't done their estate planning, I don't know what I would have done. It's a gift that you give to the people who survive you. So I hope you tune in for that. And the incredible Susie Finley from Ascent Living Community is going to be hosting that one. And then finally, all right, we have someone who needs to mute. Can someone who's talking right now mute your phone? Thank you. And then finally, on December 3rd, we have Kelly O'Connor, who is an elder care consultant, and she is just incredible. And you're going to be seeing a lot more from her. She has some new things coming up. And that will be hosted by Christina Davis, who many of you also know, who is right there waving. And she's with the Colorado Palliative Hospice and Hospice Care. So we have a lot to cover and really excited. And I just want to show these are the companies that are coming together to bring this to you. So the companies of the people who are speaking and the companies of the people who are sponsoring and helping to host this. So thank you to all of our sponsors: Feldman Mortuary, Senior Care Kelly, Moss Law, I have to move my screen here, Colorado Palliative and Hospice Care, Jewish Family Service, Serenity, and Ascent Living Communities. And if you don't know these places, they're all wonderful. So feel free to ask questions and check it out. All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing and go back to us. We are all here. This is so much fun to see all of these people. I know many of you, and I would like to introduce our featured speaker here, Jamie Sarche. Jamie, can you wave so everyone knows who you are? There we go. All right. So Jamie works with Feldman Mortuary, and I have to say that I invited her onto a Facebook Live not too long ago because I read something in the paper about the paper. Wow, how old am I? Online in a news article in my newsfeed about grief leadership. And I thought, wow, this is like, who is the best grief leader I know? And I immediately reached out to Jamie. And so Jamie, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and really why you're doing what you're doing?
Oh, thank you. I have to say, Kathy, that I knew you would be just exactly the right person to host this. And I'm so grateful to you for being the one to kick this off for us. You're really starting us on the right foot. So I have been working at Feldman's for 11 and a half years. And quite honestly, before I started as director of pre-planning, I didn't know anything about funerals. I don't have a background in social work or psychology. Really, I have no business being in this job, quite honestly. At my resume. And lucky for me, Jim Cohen, who owns Feldman Mortuary, never did look at my resume. So when I heard he was looking for someone to do this job, I just absolutely knew that it was exactly what I was meant to do. And the reason it struck me so hard was just that I am someone who likes to have deep and meaningful and authentic and important conversation. And I like to help people with things that are really hard. I was always the one growing up who people would come to when they were worried about stuff. I remember people sharing with me that they were bulimic or worried that they had a sexually transmitted disease or something like that. I was the person that they knew they could bring that to because I could hear anything and help them figure out what to do. And when I was about 26, a very close friend, Michelle, who I had known since 9th grade and whose husband I had known since we were 4, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is the brain tumor that killed Ted Kennedy. It killed John McCain. People don't survive it. And when she was diagnosed, obviously we were all in shock. It was horrible. And what we found is that everybody who was close to her would share with her that they thought she would survive it because she was young and strong. And that was, they were really being cheerleaders for her. And I handled it very differently. And I just said, you can share with me whatever you need to say. She had a 10-month-old baby. I had a 2-year-old baby. And I just said, would you share with me about your fears? Would you share with me what it feels like to know that you're not going to be here to raise Max, who's now in medical school? And she did. And we had really deep and important conversation. And it was beneficial to her, I think, but it was so beneficial to me. And it really helped me to accept her death with a lot more grace. And it's amazing to me because I really feel like she led me to this work. She's been gone for 22 or 23 years, and yet I talk about her all the time. She's always with me. And it's just, I just learned how important it is to own the reality of mortality and to really accept that that is really part of our life. And that's what I'm trying to do in my work. I help people put their funeral plans together long before they're needed to create a path for people to walk on in their bereavement. But the biggest thing that I do for them is to help them learn how to accept that death is an inevitable part of life. It's not a failure. It's okay that we die. It's sometimes really painful, but it's not wrong. Yeah. And it's just really important that we can learn how to be in that and to feel all the feelings about it.
And so you seem to have been born with this. It's innate for you, right? That was such a pivotal moment in your life, and it feels like maybe I won't say changed a trajectory, but maybe shifted you a little quicker onto a path that you were following. Do you have any advice for people how they can just be with someone and just hear them and listen and allow it to be okay, especially if the conversation is around death or grieving?
Yeah, it's just really interesting. And I'm certain we'll talk about this too when Christina is on, because, Christina works in hospice. But if we can get comfortable about it for ourselves, I think that that's what really opens the door. I think that the reason that I'm good at this is because I'm not afraid of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with having the conversation. And quite honestly, I am somebody who goes against cultural norms.
Really?
And I have a big mouth. So, the cultural norm is that this is a taboo. You're not supposed to talk about it. I can't tell you the number of times I hear the word morbid when people bring this up, when they feel like they need to talk about it. It's really even so fascinating to me that people will call me with the specific purpose of prearranging their funeral. And they feel compelled to say to me, it's not that anything's happening. It's not that I'm weird about this. They might not use the word weird, but they're like, I don't mean to be morbid. And I have to, in the first 2 minutes of the conversation, be like, hey, you don't have to explain it to me. I believe deeply that we should be doing this and talking about this. And I put my own funeral plans in place a decade ago. So I think that is the key, is to start embracing the fact that death it's part of our life. It's part of our life. And quite honestly, I don't believe that it is the end of our journey. I think there's more beyond that. And so maybe that helps me too. But I think that is really the key, is to start feeling like it is okay to talk about this stuff. And being someone who can open the door to that, it is amazing to me how often people will say, oh, I have had the weirdest question. I've been worried about the weirdest thing. The fact that I can be with them to talk about stuff that they're not supposed to talk about is really comforting to a lot of people too. So I am hoping to create ambassadors for that. So what I would like to say to everybody on the Zoom call today is, can you be ambassadors for having these hard conversations? And what I think you'll find is that people are so grateful for the opportunity.
And hungry to have someone to talk to. In fact, before we went live here tonight, I was sharing something with you, totally different subject than death, but the words out of my mouth were, there's no one else I would say this to, but I want to ask you this question. And so being the kind of person who can just be with them, whatever they're feeling. And therapists often call it meeting them where they're at. Mm-hmm. So wherever somebody is at. But the subject of death is a very difficult one. And this webinar is about life. And yet we're going to spend a lot of time talking about death, because death is a part of life. So if you came to the webinar wanting to know how to throw a big party at Thanksgiving, or, live life large like that, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what life looks like, and death is a part of that. And how does pre-planning and, what kind of mindsets can we all have to ease our minds and allow us to be graceful in whatever happens in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. I really think that the pre-planning actually is key to being graceful in the things that happen to us, because one of the things that I think really is the truth is that we're all worried about this. It kind of sits right here all the time, and especially now. Like, COVID has really just broken people open to understand we're all vulnerable. We don't know when things are going to happen. We don't know what things are going to happen. I mean, who expected anything like this? I never would have thought there was going to be a pandemic that would affect, especially the United States. It never occurred to me that we could find ourselves in this place. So I think that really helps people to understand we don't know what's going to happen. There are some things that are absolutely going to happen to each one of us. So instead of worrying about that stuff, let's just put some things in place. I have to say, one of the things that I think led me to understand this has nothing to do with death. It was when I had little kids and I was reading a book called oh shoot, now I'm not going to remember what it is. Protecting the Gift. And Pam, who just had a new baby, get that book. It's really good. So it is about listening to your instincts and teaching your children to listen to their instincts. So they'll know if they're safe, if they're not safe. It's really like about preventing, molestation or abduction or things like that. So one of the things that the writer Gavin de Becker said is worry disconnects us from our instincts. So if you're worried that your child is going to fall down the stairs, you feel like you're taking action because you're worried, but really it's disconnecting you from your ability to handle it. So instead of worrying, get a baby gate for the top of the stairs. Then have to worry anymore, and then your attention can be on the things that really matter. And I think that's what this is too. Don't worry who's going to take care of your financial matters. Get them handled with Pam. Don't worry about what's going to happen after when you die and you can't be here to take care of your loved ones. Lay all of that out. Get it taken care of so that you can be present in your life.
I think that's brilliant. And I love the analogy of putting a baby gate up because it's such a simple analogy. And I think most people can relate to the concept of a dog or a child or something that you're trying to protect. And if you're constantly worried they're going to stick their finger in the socket and then you plug the socket, great. Then you now have mind space that is so freed up. And that's not a little bit of mind space. It's a lot of mind space. Yeah.
And also the idea of putting the little things in the socket, that doesn't then make the kid go to the
Right. Right.
That's the thing. I think that often we're in this place of thinking, if I plan, that means something will happen. I mean, 70% of people, maybe more, die without a will. They die without their advance directives. Way more die without funeral and memorial service plans because they are convinced that if they do those things, they will die. And what I just want to say to all of them is they will die anyway. The question is, will they die with a plan in place? And will they cause all the terrible stuff that they don't want to happen because they're too afraid to plan?
And I think about that, Jamie, as a little bit of fear of their own mortality. And I could imagine my dad not being afraid it would happen, but not wanting to face that it's going to happen. Although I do want to share my story. And before I do, I just want to let everyone know, if you have questions, post them in the chat, please. And you can post them just directly to me if you don't want it to be a public one. Otherwise, post it to everyone. And Jamie's here to answer questions. So please make this interactive.
Yes,
my parents did all of their estate planning, all of their financial planning. And they did it because I have a brother who has schizophrenia. And their big fear was that he wouldn't be taken care of. And I have to tell you that on their deathbeds, both of them, when I said goodbye to them, I'm going to tear up. My brother's name is John. I said, I've got John. It's okay. And you've put everything in place for him. And I promise you that it was within minutes that both of them passed. Because that's part of what you hold on to as a parent. And, whatever that is, take that for anything, substitute that for anything in your life that you might hold on to. Having all the plans in place beforehand gives you the ability to let it go and to know that it's going to be okay. And boy, don't we need more of that.
Yes. It's interesting. I honor exactly what you're saying. Sometimes, this was before COVID, we would go to this restaurant, on Sunday mornings, and there was often this father and son. And the father was very elderly, and the son was obviously developmentally disabled. And I would just sit there and think how terrifying that father must feel, how terrified he must feel knowing his child who needed him is going to outlive him. And I think about that a lot.
Yeah. I
Oh,
have another friend in that situation, and a similar situation. And I mean, it consumes you. We have some comments. This is great. So Christina said, I say all the time, talking about hospice doesn't hasten your illness or condition. Same concept, planning ahead doesn't change your journey. That's beautiful, Christina. And I know when my parents each were on hospice, the hospice providers were the most amazing people. I don't know how we could have gotten through it without them. I'm a huge fan of hospice, and hospice sooner than you think you need it.
Yes. Way sooner.
Such a life.
As soon as you're able.
Yeah.
As soon as you
Soon as you're
qualify.
able. And it's free to you. So that's the other thing. People think there's money involved. There is, but not to you. So another question, and this is great because this is aligned with what we were talking about before we went live. What do you do if people won't use the word death or died? Somebody died. And we talked about how we like to soften it and say, my father passed away. My mom has moved on. And I think that's fine, but why are we so afraid to say the word death?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I really liken it to how a generation or two ago, we would teach kids about their body parts using euphemisms. And
That's true.
we would teach them about their wee-wee and their pee-pee and their hoo-ha.
Yeah.
And it's because it made the adults feel more comfortable. Like they didn't want to acknowledge the sexuality of children, I think. And yeah, what we really have learned is that using those euphemisms made their children think that their body parts are shameful and weird. So if God forbid something happens that they need to share, maybe they have some sort of illness, maybe they're being touched inappropriately, they can't tell us because we've told them they're not allowed to talk about it. And I think it's the same thing with death. You know, now we've learned to use the proper terminology with our children. And I don't think there are many parents these days who aren't using the anatomically correct terms, but there are plenty of people who are still saying passed away. And quite honestly, or just even passed. And I think that the funeral business has really done a lot of that. And I think that it's that the funeral business really wants to soften it and not acknowledge that death is painful. And the truth about it with feelings is if you don't allow the full depth of your emotions, you don't process it, and you don't let it flow through you. So it's just stuck. And using the incorrect language, I think makes it stuck, makes it harder to grieve. Quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with grieving. It's the reflection of the love that we grieve. It's actually a gift that we feel enough about someone who dies that we grieve. We just don't talk about that enough. We don't really understand it. Most of us don't talk about grieving at all, except for maybe in 9th grade psychology when we learn a little bit about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You know, we learn about the stages of grief. The interesting thing with that, though, is that she was not studying bereavement. She was studying anticipatory grief of somebody who had a terminal illness and was coming to terms with the fact of their own death, not learning to live with the fact of someone's death, someone who we love. So it's really fascinating that people think we have these very distinct stages of, oh, I'm in denial, I'm bargaining, I'm angry. That must mean I'm almost done.
Right.
And what they really don't understand or want to accept is that grieving is not linear and it doesn't end. It gets easier sometimes. You've said it beautifully. Will you share how you talk about your own grieving?
Yeah, for me, it felt like my arm had been cut off and I had to regrow a new arm. And I also have another way of saying it, like you don't get over it, you just get better at it. And I think that that's
Yes.
really important too, is we do,
Yeah.
you hit on something really important, which is there's not an end to this. It's not like you grieve and then you wake up one day and go, I'm done grieving. It's always a
Yeah.
part of you. It lessens and then, it
Yeah.
ebbs and flows, and it hits you when you're walking down the street and you see something that reminds you of the person that you're grieving, or um, you're making a meal and it reminds you of them, and that's appropriate. But one thing
And
that
a gift that you get reminded of them in that way.
yeah, and I like that you have reframed it. That's what you're doing here, is reframing it as
Yeah.
this is a gift to be able to grieve. And I want to kind of come back to the question about what about the word. You have advice for people when they have had someone who has died and everyone else says to them, oh, I'm sorry, your loved one passed, and they actually want them to acknowledge I'm sorry, he's dead, he's not with us anymore. See, even I'm doing it, I'm like finding all these different ways of saying things. So what do you
Yeah.
do if
And all of those things can be true. I mean, maybe he passed away and no, he's not with us anymore, but the verb is that he died. I really do think that we just have to practice. It really is a practice. There is a really wonderful organization in Utah called the Sharing Place. It is a grief support network and place for kids whose parents have died. And what's amazing is that we have no idea how many children have a parent die before the age of 18. It's like 1 in 20. And I have a feeling that those statistics are going to get even more because of COVID. So what happens at the Sharing Place is that the kids, every time they're there, they talk about what happened. So they'll say, my mom got a virus called COVID and she died. My dad had an illness called depression and he hanged himself and he died. And they literally have to practice saying it over and over again, because talking about it normalizes it. It tells other people that they can share their experience too, and helps us all feel less isolated and alone. And
wow,
really important.
so the less isolation, the less feeling alone, that is the headlines today in today's
Yes.
news. So,
Yes.
we've talked about this before, the grieving around COVID, around the loss of a job, around any loss in life. We go through a process, but it's not a linear process. Do you want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah. Grieving. And you're right. I mean, we could be grieving a lot of things. I don't know about all of you all, but I am grieving the loss of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You know, the loss of normalcy, the loss of going to the movies. And I'm really doing well. I have my job, my husband's working, both of my children are working, we're all safe, we have a good house, we have space. We're so lucky. And yet we're still having a lot of loss. And I don't need to it doesn't help anybody else who's having more loss, more significant loss, for me to minimize the fact that I'm in pain too. Me saying, oh, but I'm fine, it really doesn't help the person who lost a job or lost a loved one or whatever. So it's just really important that we learn to embrace where we are and honor where we are. We really have a society of rescue. I don't know about you all, but I often hear people say, at least he died doing something he loved, at least he lived a long life, versus, wow, I'm really sorry that you have to figure out how to live without your dad anymore. You know,
Wow.
it must
So
be painful.
that's really good. That's a great response. And I think we need more of those. We need more, more ways to respond and more ways to be with someone in their pain, because we aren't taught this. We're just not
Right.
taught it.
And we're afraid to be silent.
Yeah.
And the silence is probably the most powerful. And it is okay to say, I have no words. I don't know what to say to you. I can't make you feel better. I just want you to know that I am here. And that's really hard right now because, like, literally, I've been teaching a class for years called The Gift of Your Presence, and really teaching people how to be with people as they're grieving. And a bunch of the things that I talk about are like, be physically present for them. Can't do that. Don't bring your own stuff into it. Quite honestly, we're all in this place. So things right now with COVID are just magnified times a million. But what I do think is that the gift of this is that we are now recognizing how important it is to talk about it. We're recognizing how important ritual is because we can't have it. We're recognizing the importance of community because we can't have it. And so I'm really hoping that we are going to embrace that and come out of this stronger and better and more connected because of the disconnection we're all feeling right now.
I think that's great. And I believe that. And I'm an optimist oftentimes. So, but I want to believe that. And to me, that's a way that I can live my life. If I think about things like that, there's good that will come out of this. And yet hard is hard. And so I'll go to what Christina just posted here. Christina Davis, thank you. I was thinking the same thing, like it's like we almost compete with each other for like, are we gonna grieve more than you? Or I don't know. So she wrote, it's not a competition. Hard is hard, tough is tough. Pain is pain. It's not a competition. And that's really it. And it's, when I was grieving my parents and at the funerals, at the end of the funeral, I'm the only girl in the family. I have 3 brothers. We were all walking away, at the graveside. Everything was done. Everyone was going back to their car. I went back alone and just, hugged the casket and said my goodbye. And my brothers would inevitably come over and say, it's okay. Are you okay? Are you okay? And while that was sweet, I wanted recognition that it was really just okay for me to want to go back and hug their casket and kiss it one last time and say my goodbyes. So it's really more about the other person being uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes. People's pain makes us really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we want to fix it. And I'm telling you, I might know a lot of this, but I am a rescuer. And so I find myself, really being like having to stop myself a lot. Sometimes I'll say to somebody, I learned this really the hard way. I was with somebody whose child had just died. And I found myself saying, how are you? And then I literally said, how do I think you are? You're not good. I'm so sorry. I just said that stupid thing. I just want you to know I'm here with you. So, it's okay to screw up, and you're going to. And it is okay. Because one of the things that really happens is people are so fearful that they will screw up that they withdraw.
Yes. Yes. And I've seen that over and over. I had a colleague whose husband passed away suddenly. And this was years ago. And I asked her what she needed. What do you need? And she couldn't answer, but there was someone else there who had dealt with a close death.
Mm-hmm.
And she came over to me and she pulled me aside and she said, Kathy, you know what she really needs? For you not to leave and ghost her for the next year. Just check in with her when she really is going to need it, is going to be throughout the year, especially the first year. Just check in. It's not a big thing, but check in with her. And I thought that was really
Yes.
interesting.
And how wonderful that she gave you that advice too. One of the things that I often say is, let's not ask people, what do you need? Or say, we often will say, please let me know if I can do anything. I'm here for you. Please let me know. Well, A, they don't know what they need because they can't think. And B, they don't want to impose. So being able to say, can I come over every week and take your trash cans to the curb? Can I send a cleaning lady for the reception? Can I, take your kids to school? Can I walk your dog? Can I, come up with the things that you're willing and able to do and offer those specific things? That's really helpful. The one thing I am going to say though is don't do things without somebody's permission. Like don't decide I'm going to go into Joanne's house and I'm going to clean it for her. And then you throw away the Coke can, but that's the last Coke can that Joanne's husband ever drank out of, and she needs that. I mean, we just don't know what somebody needs, and let's not push them because it fits into our time frame. Often we'll say to people, well, I'll come over and help you clean out the closet. Well, they might not be ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So even just saying, when you're ready, I can be there for you.
Yes.
When you clean out the closet.
Yes.
But we have a couple questions. I'm going to take
Great.
Juliana's first. Hi, Juliana. Can you talk about the weeks and months after when no one is showing up?
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. And again, I think that we're speaking to that idea, like that people don't know what to say and they don't know what to do. And what's interesting is they all think that other people know what to say and do, and that, there's something wrong with them for not knowing. So they just go away because they are really uncomfortable. I think that this is all about being ambassadors for this. I think Kathy's friend did it really well of just saying, here's what somebody's going to need. I always put the loved one's death date in my calendar, and I reach out to them around that time because I know other people are not doing that and they want to know that you remember their loved one. And the other thing I would say is use that person's name. Oftentimes the person who died, their name never gets said again because people are like worried that, oh, if I bring up, PJ's name, that's going to make his mom feel bad. Well, she doesn't forget that PJ died. So bringing him up helps her know that you didn't forget that PJ died and that you didn't forget that PJ lived. And it's really important. So I don't have great advice for what to do if you're the one who's bereaved and your loved ones, your friends have kind of abandoned you, except maybe reach out to say, I really need you. Can you come back to me? Because I really need you. And please, I think that sometimes people feel really guilty that they didn't do something and they don't know how to just say that. There are these incredible cards. I don't know if you've all seen these Emily McDowell cards. They are like, I forget what she calls them, but there are cards that will say, I'm so sorry I've been out of touch. I just didn't know what to say to you.
Wow.
And things like that. I think they're called empathy cards.
Okay.
Or they'll be like, let me be the first one to punch in the face anybody who says what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
They're good.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What's her name again? Emily
McDowell.
And we'll see if we can get that in the show notes somehow when we publish this video or something, because I think it's really important for people to have an out. When we don't know what to say, we need some go-to things that will aid us in getting over that. And what I'm hearing in all of this is just be authentic, just be real. Just be real.
Vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to remind everybody is these things are not, well, aside from COVID, these things are not typically contagious. You know, I think that that often is what happens to us is we'll say like, you know, somebody will have lung cancer and we feel compelled to go, did he smoke? Like it's his fault that now he has lung cancer.
Right.
And if we can think it's his fault, then we can think, well, I would never smoke. So that protects me from ever having that. And I think we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. We're not at fault for the things that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my challenge to everyone on this webinar right now is think of someone in your life who has had someone die, and think about whether there's a way you can reach out, even if it's just to say, you know, I was thinking about Joe the other day, and maybe I have this great memory of him, and I want to share that and just check in with you and see how you're doing. So that's my challenge for everybody out there. Reach out to someone. We are all so isolated right now, and we do everything we can, like these Zoom meetings and all the networking and the things that so many of the people even on this call are actively working all the time to put together. And we need that personal connection, just a phone call. It doesn't have to be anything big. And if we can get over our own selves, it will go a long way, because so much of it, I think, comes, from us. So we have a couple other comments here. Someone here shares a story of when they were a principal of a school and a student died. One of the parents offered to take the two girls. So the parent, I guess a student died, asked to take the siblings shopping for clothes to wear to a wedding, because the mom wouldn't have had time to do that. And they ended up with just lovely dark velvet dresses. And I just think that's the kind of gift. And it goes along with what you were saying. Ask can I take your children? Can I take the other two and get them ready for this wedding that you have to go to? And I know you're distraught. I can't imagine what it would be like.
Oh. Well, and to just have extra people, extra grown-ups at a time, because if you have a child die, God forbid, you know, I mean, it's not anything that is in the natural scheme of things. It's one thing when a 97-year-old dies, and that's plenty hard. But a child, it's destroying. And you have to keep moving forward if you have other children. And to have some extra support in that, what an incredible gift that is, to just say, let me do this thing that you can't do.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam, for putting the Emily McDowell link in the chat. So anyone interested in those, go grab that. Wonderful. And Marianne, you just posted as well. There's another question here. Recommendations on how to respond to social media posts about the loss of a loved one.
So here's the first thing I'm going to say. Unless it is your loved one who died, do not be the one to post in social media about it. Because what often happens is I'll post that, you know, Joe died, and Joe's cousin maybe didn't know that Joe died, and I should not be the one who he hears it from. So unless it is your loved one, your close loved one, do not be the one who posts in social media. A. B, I think that it really has to be how it works for you. Like, I am not someone who thinks that Facebook is the best way to express your sentiments around this. But I have a friend whose dad died, and she got a lot of, she felt very supported by all of that. So I think it just depends on who you are. But I would say do the other things too. So if you're going to send a message by Facebook, great. But again, not announcing the death. But if you're going to send a message to the bereaved, great. do that. But also send a card. Also, if you're able, go to the funeral. Also, maintain connection with the bereaved. So do all of those things. Don't just think, oh, I sent a little message by Facebook, so now I'm off the hook. I did what I needed to do. I mean, certainly with the people who are meaningful in your life, you could, if it's somebody who's far out in your world and you send a message by Facebook, that's a nice thing, because probably you wouldn't have been doing those other things if you didn't do Facebook. So I hope that makes sense. Do all the things. Be there in that year, really that year. And I've heard the second year is often even worse because people they remember how bad the first year was and they are anticipating how bad each Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving or whatever. They just see it coming and it's really hard on them too. So really continue to be there for them. And if some of that is by social media, okay.
Makes sense. That's great. Christina posted, I have a very wise friend of mine taught me, asking for what you want or need still feels good as if they did it on their own. The chat just moved, so hang on.
That's a great point that Christina made though, too. It's like sometimes we feel resentful. Somebody had said, what do we do when our friends kind of leave? It's okay to ask. And we can feel resentful that, Bob didn't do a good job being there for me. And we can feel really resentful. And it would be okay to try to say, hey, Bob, I really need you. This is what I need. And it's okay to acknowledge that we have needs. And it does make it just as meaningful. It's okay that you had to tell them. I mean, I think probably we've learned that as spouses, if you're married to somebody and you have to say, I need you to do this, it's still as meaningful as if the person thought to do it on their own. It's okay to ask for what we need.
That's good, because that's another thing, and this is more gender-based, and it's a very big generalization, but little girls are definitely not taught from my generation how to ask for what we need. Yeah. We're taught to be, at least I was. I should say that. At least I was.
And you know what? That's also part of this is we have to learn to receive. We have to allow people to care for us.
Yeah.
We're very quick to say, oh, no, I'm fine. I got it. Allow people to bring you soup, because that is going to help them too. By knowing they help you, that's going to help them.
Such an important lesson for all of life, not just during bereavement. And Marianne posted, I appreciated cards when my parents died because I wasn't really hearing what people said at the time, because you're so emotional, right? Yes. But being able to read and reread the cards is comforting. And I want to go back. We have a question from Juliana. Can you talk about the anticipatory grief? Did I even say that word right?
Yeah, you did. I wonder if Christina has some things to share about anticipatory grief. Christina, could you jump in here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I meet with families all the time, and I just met with a family today, as a matter of fact, and we had 2 hours of questions and what if I decide this? What if I decide this? What if I change my mind? What if I want to keep fighting? And I met with mom and 2 daughters. And what I encourage people is that, grief starts almost as soon as something changes, right? As soon as mom is not mom anymore, as soon as dad is not dad anymore. I'm dealing with it with my own in-laws. And it's one of those things that, my mother-in-law, my husband just the other day said to me, I wish you had known mom when she was mom. And you know, they're already starting that grieving process, losing her before she's even gone, and trying to stay present with where she is right now. I think that's a really, you know, it's hard. It's just flat out hard. And, you know, the adult children that are helping mom or dad in whatever process they're in, or the spouse, you know, we're great until something changes, right? And then we're still great, but now there's a difference. Now it's different, and it's hard to grieving is okay. And I think that's where Jamie, you know, keeps coming into it. It's okay to be sad about losing your loved one before you lose them. It's okay for your loved one to be different or be changing before they actually die, before they're actually gone. I did that with my own father. My own father had dementia, and you know, the last few years of his life were completely different than the man I grew up with. And you just have to. You know, you don't have to do anything. Actually, you can do whatever you want, but you know, figuring out a way to meet them where they are, instead of, you know, trying so hard to grasp onto what they were, you know, as we change and as our conditions change and our symptoms change.
And meet yourself where you are.
And acknowledge that you're sad. You're really sad about the fact that you're losing your loved one before they die. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing easy about it. And there's also some peace in it. There's some peace in acknowledging that, you know, mom's not who she was 15 years ago. Mom's not who she was a year ago. Sometimes it's mom isn't who she is a month ago. And so, you know, just really walking into it and sitting in it and sitting in the grief and sitting in the sadness and sitting in the acknowledgement that there, you know, things are changing. Doesn't make it any easier, but embracing it wholeheartedly and really sitting with it and feeling it, you know, and talking to your loved one about it. You know, I mean, I talked with my dad about his changes and how things were, and it was one of the biggest conversations of my entire life. You know, it didn't make it any easier when he died, but just acknowledging it in the moment was profoundly powerful.
And
So
one of the things that might make it easier, though, when that person does die, there's more completeness.
Yeah.
Because you've talked about the things you need to talk about. You know that you have shared and asked and been present for all of the things. And the things that I've just learned in my life and continue to have to teach myself is the regrets I have are not typically for the things I do. They're typically for the things I didn't do.
Don't say. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, all of this, it's making me think about a term that someone in our family was recently hospitalized and for psychiatric conditions, and they came back from classes saying they've been taught about radical acceptance. And I thought, wow. And I think about the journey that I had with my mom, and I look back on it, and people might think that this was a strange way to react. My mom had Alzheimer's for 10 years. The last 2 years, she was nonverbal. You know, she went downhill. That's not even a great term. She just had a progression of things. And once I became accepting of wherever she was in that moment, I was just joyful to have my mom. I was joyful, not joyful that she was dealing with this, but joyful that I had who she was in that moment. And that's who I was having the relationship with, was that woman, whether she was nonverbal or whether she could only say the word apples and nothing else, or whether she was having all of the physical things with incontinence, and I was helping her, other people were helping her. And to just accept that and have joy in my heart was maybe the most freeing thing. So I don't know if that's what radical acceptance means, but I think it's definitely along the lines. I know there's a clinical definition for it, but
And
I-
Kathy, something you just said, like my father just put a memory in my head. When my father was dying, right? Like he dealt with dementia for many years. We think it was Lewy body, but who knows? And I remember when we finally started the hospice program with my father. He was only on the hospice for a week. I didn't have the education I have now. And the very first night of hospice, he was getting out of bed and talking, and he was lucid, and it was all the, he was like, I mean, he was him again, and he was like, let's go home, let's go get dinner. Like he was all those things, right? And a very compassionate, amazing nurse pulled me aside and said, this is probably the storm before the calm. And I remember thinking, I was questioning the DNR. I was questioning everything because look at him, he's trying to get out of bed, right? And I looked at my dad. I said, don't talk, the nurse and the doctor and everybody were in the room at the same time. And he's like, don't talk about me like I'm not here, And I looked at him and I said, well, Dad, I'm looking at how strong you are and how you're getting out of bed. And he's like, and he looked at me square in the face and he says, I'm not strong, I'm dying. And I was like, whoa, right? Like, it was just this moment of, okay, like, oh, okay, well, whew, you know what I mean? It took a bit to jump into that. And I was like, okay, well, and then we started being able to have conversations about, okay, we're going to be okay. And it's okay to go. And I'm going to really miss you. But, it was one of those moments that I'll never forget in my life. And I think about that, he was the one that told me, he's like, I'm not okay, I'm dying. We're like, get on board.
wow.
It was one of those. So yeah, I totally hear. I mean, didn't make it any harder when he actually died, but man, the radical acceptance that you talked about, whew, washed right.
He gave you permission to have the really important
He
conversation.
did. He did.
Really,
So,
that's such a powerful story, Christina. And thank you for sharing that. I hope that everyone on the call got something from that, because it does happen. And we're coming up on time here. I want to first do a little highlight some 3 key points that Jamie called out in this conversation today. Use the word death or died. Practice it. Try it. Just try it out. If it's uncomfortable, there's a reason, and that's probably some subconscious shaming that's been done in our society. Maybe all of us on this call could start a movement and get rid of the shame around using that word.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Worry disconnects us from our instincts. So when you're worried about something, think about what action can you take to alleviate that worry, whatever it is. Put up the baby gate, journal, go talk to a friend, whatever you need. And then the third one is grieving is a gift. So really reframing that when a friend is grieving or someone you know is grieving, that's a gift for them that they're grieving. And the gift that you can give them is to just be with them in that and not try to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie, what last things do you want to say to our audience here?
Well, I am just so very grateful that you're all here tonight. It really just feels so lovely to be with you. And I want to thank Pam and Kelly for putting this series together. And I am excited for next week for Pam to speak. And I'm so excited for 2 weeks from now for Kelly to speak. And Kathy, I just can't say enough how grateful I am to you for really just facilitating this conversation. Thank you so much for all that you do. We're just all lucky to be together today. And I just want everybody to be healthy and safe And to just realize that, quite honestly, when Christina was sharing that her dad said, "I'm dying," we all are.
Yes.
It's just part of our life, and it's okay.
And it's okay. Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamie. You're a delight. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for the great questions. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
And just remember, if you have not signed up yet for next week and the week after Thanksgiving, please do, so we can see you again. And thanks for sharing. Thanks for asking questions.
Good night,
Great.
everybody.